Hi, my name's Rachel, and today we are talking about It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover, which has been talked about a lot recently as the movie was just adapted and had a lot of shenanigans behind the scenes. I have nothing but issues with Colleen Hoover's books in general. This is the third one that I have read from her, specifically because of the way that she portrays romantic relationships, and this one is no exception. In fact, I would say that this one is worse than the last two that I read. Well, I don't know, the arson one was pretty bad. This one features two romantic relationships. Our main character, Lily, is in a relationship with one guy named Atlas and one guy named Ryle. Ryle is abusive, and Atlas is supposed to be the nice guy. But red flags abound regardless. Again, this is pretty typical for Colleen Hoover men love interests. Every single one of them, to one degree or another, I find their behavior repulsive. It just serves to make me very thankful for the partner I have. I don't know what this book's purpose was. I guess it served to have a frank conversation about abuse and how we tend to judge people who are in abusive relationships, but I don't think that it does that very well. All it served for me was to showcase how even when Colleen tries to write a love interest who's a good guy, she fails to do that without making him a sea of red flags, which again is par the course, seeing as I have also read Ugly Love and November 9, and that is what I experienced in both those books with their love interests. So again, all this served to do was show how much of a stark contrast there is between these gross fictional men and my real life husband. I'm incredibly lucky to have a partner who is so far away from being a Colleen Hoover love interest. He didn't just come out that way. We did get here through work. We've been together for this year, officially makes 16 years. We've had to learn how to be supportive partners and be communicative. Open and honest communication is hard no matter who you are, even if you are the cinnamon roll that is my husband. Carlos and I are always trying to learn to make our relationship healthier, and one thing that we've been using to do that is today's sponsor, which is the Paired app. The Paired app is a relationship app designed for couples that offers daily conversation starters and expert-backed advice to strengthen communication and deepen emotional connection, making the everyday journey of staying in love more meaningful and enjoyable. Paired offers daily activities, conversation starters, and games that encourage couples to explore their relationship, maybe even in new ways. Carlos actually saw the Paired app mentioned in another video and said we should download that, and I was like, say less, I love this kind of stuff. It's a fun and easy app for couples of all ages to use no matter how long you've been together. I really like their quizzes and their questions because you don't get to see your partner's answer until you answer. So yesterday, the question of the day was, what's your favorite date that you ever had? And I answered, it was the time that we went snorkeling on this little tiny little island, and then we were so hungry afterwards that we went and got curry afterwards. And I told him, hey, go answer the question. And I gave him a hint. I was like, okay, so just so you know, my answer is about when we used to live in Japan. So he talked about how one of his favorite dates was prom at Booknet Fest, because he and I didn't get to go to prom even though we did go to high school together. And then he also mentioned like the time that we went and we went to a sushi making class together when we lived in Japan. And today's question, I'm still waiting for his answer. The question was, can you name a country Carlos wants to visit? And I believe he just mentioned that he wants to see Thailand recently, but I know we've been talking for a while about wanting to go to Ireland, and we do have plans to go next year. But it's fun to like chit chat about like where we want to go, what we want to see together. Most of it's food. I love that the Paired app has everything organized for you on whatever topic you might want to focus on. Not only like just general communication, but conflict solving, sex and intimacy, finance, homework balance, and there's even a section for LGBTQ+ partners to navigate our specific joys and challenges, like talking about our found family. The Paired app has research-based ways to get you and your partner communicating using super fun games, quizzes, and questions. And Paired Premium has even more to offer. They have great question packs and relationship check-ins. All of these are small but impactful ways to build communication and intimacy. Carlos and I both have full-time jobs. We're also raising 2 kids, so even getting time together is very difficult, but the Paired app has made it easy for us to make time for each other in small but impactful ways, even when we're not in the same room or even in the house together at all. So whether you're hoping to learn about a new partner of yours or like me, your partner of 16 years, click my link in the description to get a 7-day free trial and 25% off of Paired Premium so you can maintain and deepen your connection with your partner. And thank you to the Paired app for sponsoring today's video. And thank you to Carlos for 16 years of love and for not being a Colleen Hoover book love interest. I am not going to discuss the It Ends With Us movie or the shenanigans behind the scenes of that today. We're just going to discuss the book, and boy howdy, do I have a lot to say. I have pages and pages of notes. Almost nothing I have to say is good. Almost nothing. I'm going to give you trigger warnings, even though Colleen wouldn't, because she doesn't believe in them, which is ridiculous. This book depicts abusive relationships, obviously, alcohol abuse, childbirth, child abuse, both physical and like emotional, like kicking a teenager out of a house. Death, it is mentioned that there is death of a sibling and a parent off page. Depression, domestic abuse, which is, I would say, very graphic in this book. Drug use, specifically marijuana, if that bothers you. The book sort of opens up with a scene of marijuana smoking. Infertility struggles dealt with by a side character. Pregnancy, rape, sexual content, discussion of suicide, as in a character admitting that they wanted at one point to end their life, verbal abuse, and physical violence. Now that I've given you content warnings, I'm going to give my spiel on why I think this book is gross. And really it just goes back to like, what is the authorial intent here? This book has no trigger warnings, but that's common for traditional publishing still. And I'm not advocating for mandates on content warnings. I will say that one of my favorite books, which is Salva Tahir's All My Rage, which also deals with abusive parents or abusive parental figures, alcoholism, that book has trigger warnings in it, and I was deeply appreciative of that. And certainly there's no mandate. I'm not advocating for a mandate on that, because mandates on things like that will end up getting taken over, similarly to how the MPAA, which rates movies, is run, and the wrong people will be in charge and be using that to say, trigger warning, this book has gay people in it. So I am advocating for us to do it on our own as a courtesy and normalize it amongst each other as courtesy and as protection for those who can't read about certain things. For instance, I can't read about child death and people on page experiencing traumatic miscarriages, which is why some of Colleen's books I simply cannot read. But Colleen is opposed to trigger warnings, which I'll come back to in a second. This book is categorized as romance. This book is marketed as romance. And again, there are two romances that do happen within the pages, but I wouldn't call this after reading it, if you were to ask me, what kind of book is that? I would not call this a romance book. I didn't read this for the purpose of romance, but there aren't many clues for what you are getting into when you crack this shit open, such as the synopsis makes it seem like there's romance and maybe a love triangle. I'll read it to you. Sometimes it's the one who loves you who hurts you the most. Now, there is no indicator there that that means domestic violence. Lily hasn't always had it easy, but that's never stopped her from working hard for the life she wants. She's come a long way from the small town in Maine where she grew up. She graduated from college, moved to Boston, and started her own business. So when she feels a spark with a gorgeous neurosurgeon named Ryle Kincaid, everything in Lily's life suddenly seems almost too good to be true. Ryle is assertive, stubborn, maybe even a little arrogant. He's also sensitive, brilliant, and has a total soft spot for Lily. A total soft spot? That's not how I would categorize what he feels for Lily. That feels incredibly disingenuous. And the way he looks in Scrubs certainly doesn't hurt. Lily can't get him out of her head, but Ryle's complete aversion to relationships is disturbing. Even as Lily finds herself becoming the exception to his no dating rule, she can't help but wonder what made him this way in the first place. This is no different from Ugly Love, which is a romance book by Colleen about the exact same thing. Guy does not want to be in a relationship, has a soft spot for this girl. He starts to feel differently, but he has trauma and she's trying to figure out what exactly prevents him from wanting to be in a relationship. This is beat for beat Ugly Love. But that was the entire purpose of writing Ugly Love. Whereas in this book, that's not what this book is about. It's about domestic violence. And yet Colleen, in whatever part she took in creating this synopsis, decided not to let you know about that and just decided to make it sound like not much all that different from Ugly Love. As questions about her new relationship overwhelm her, so do thoughts of Atlas Corrigan, her first love, and a link to the past she left behind. He was her kindred spirit, her protector. When Atlas suddenly reappears, everything Lily has built with Ryle is threatened. Nothing about this is telling me that this is a book about domestic violence. And I get the sneaking suspicion that Colleen does this on purpose, doesn't want it categorized for what it is, doesn't want to give you clues, because of the same reason she said this about trigger warnings. What if the writer doesn't want you to know that the book deals with rape, or murder, or extramarital affairs, or domestic violence, or cancer, the death of a child? What if the reading experience would be ruined if one of these issues was not meant to be revealed before reading the book? Hello. Hi. I'm a reader here. Colleen, and other writers listening, you don't get to decide what your reading experience is. You get to decide what your intention is in writing it, but that doesn't actually have to be the experience of the reader. You don't get to dictate that. And you definitely don't get to try to pull a bait and switch so that you can force that experience upon the reader. That's not a good idea. What I'm getting from that line, that paragraph, and the synopsis, and having read the book and seeing multiple marketing campaigns for it, including the coloring book and the nail polish, and then seeing the movie have the exact same criticisms of misrepresenting what is inside of it. What I'm getting from all of that, the whole package, not just one piece, but all of those different little clues, is that Colleen Hoover doesn't care about depicting domestic violence in the conversational way that she claims to at the end of the book in her author's note, but rather is interested in using topics like domestic violence as a twist so that she can give you a particular reading experience. But she wants you to experience the way she wants you to experience it. Whatever you're bringing into it doesn't matter to Colleen, clearly from what I'm seeing. So what we are doing in this book, ignore the synopsis because it's not telling you shit. I'm going to give you a full rundown of everything that happened in the book, but first I'm going to tell you why this book is not a good book. So what we're doing in this book, the synopsis, again, is not telling you what's actually going on. It's as vague as my mother is when she wants me to come to a social gathering that she knows either somebody in our family who I'm related to who I don't speak to anymore, or one of her weirdo friends is going to be there, and she's trying to avoid telling me so that I'll show up anyway. So she avoids saying it. That's Colleen. Because what we're actually doing is this. Lily Bloom is a 23-year-old living in Boston. She's originally from Maine. She meets Ryle Kincaid in the first chapter. There's a deep attraction there. He doesn't want a relationship. She is only interested in finding her one true love. Lily is dealing with her father having just died. She just came from the funeral when they meet in this first chapter, and her father was physically, verbally, and sexually abusive to her mother. And her whole life, while she loves her mom, she holds a lot of resentment and judgment for her mom for not leaving her abusive father. And via Lily reading her old journals from when she was 15, journals which are, for some unknown reason that absolutely does nothing for this story or for any, there's no purpose to it. The journals are written in letter format addressed to Ellen DeGeneres, and through these letters we learn the details of Lily's experiences of watching and experiencing her dad's abuse, as well as her falling in love with this 18-year-old kid named Atlas, who was kicked out of his house and is living in an abandoned house behind Lily's. And later, she runs into Atlas again as an adult. And when Ryle finally decides to be with her, magically, she has changed his stance on relationships as a whole, just like in Ugly Love. But now, Ryle's jealousy of any mention of Atlas, small as they may be, becomes a huge problem. And Ryle becomes increasingly more and more abusive towards Lily. So Lily ends up in this cycle of domestic abuse that her mother was also in. That's what the book is actually about. I would not categorize this as a romance book. And while this has an author's note, slapped at the end about how Colleen's mom's experiences with Colleen's dad inspired this story, her mom was brave enough to leave, is how she frames it. And there's also a note that says, here's the domestic abuse hotline. Again, that placement of it being at the end of the book feels so incredibly intentional, only because of the context of all these other things that I've already mentioned. For me, there were red flags and warning signs about both Ryle and Atlas early on, and I thought maybe we'd reflect on that, but knowing Colleen's way of writing men, I don't think that they were intentional anymore. I think that some of these things Colleen just thinks is normal men behavior. Atlas being 18 and being disappointed that Lily is not 16 yet for, purposes is a red flag. Ryle coming on page 1 and beating up a chair is a red flag, but I guess it's too much to ask that red flag behavior be dealt with on page. And having a conversation about that from someone who said she doesn't want you to know about the triggering content before you read it, I guess it all just comes together and makes complete sense. Later in the book, it says that Lily feels like there were two versions of Ryle. The guy she loved is dead and replaced by this guy who's abusing her. And I was confused because I thought she was going to say, well, if I think back on it, here are all the things I excused in my own mind. Maybe it wasn't that they were two different people. Maybe it's that I saw what I wanted to see. I had this experience with my own dad, not in a physical abuse relationship, but my dad was an alcoholic. And I was doing this for a long time where I was making excuses for my dad's behavior. I was seeing these red flag behaviors and sort of doing a lot of mental gymnastics and making a lot of verbal excuses to other people as to why these things were happening. No, it's not that. It's just that. And to some degree, my brother is still sort of doing this. And I think that's because he wasn't living with our dad in the house I was when the alcoholism really became a problem. And so my brother believes that the alcoholism, and my dad is also a hoarder, is related to my dad's girlfriend that came in the picture, but those things were happening before the girlfriend. So he believes there's this version of our dad before the girlfriend and after, and that's just not true. There were plenty of signs, so many red flags that I tried to pass off and rationalize to myself and to others. So all this to say, I thought Lily was going to have that aha moment that I had, where I'm like, no, I've been ignoring stuff. Actually, the excuses that I'm making, they don't make sense. I've glossed over these things that are now, if I'm looking back, they're all context to this bigger picture that I'm experiencing with this person abusing alcohol. And now everything, all those red flags, taking those into account, I understand where I'm at now and what's really happening. But Lily didn't. And that was the icing on the cake for me with this book to prove how shallow this is. Because even though Colleen says in the author's note that the intention is to have a discussion about domestic violence, all these other clues tell me that that wasn't the intention. Or if it was, Colleen's really bad at her job, because this is some of the most shallow discussion of domestic violence that I've ever seen. But again, all of this makes very much sense when you take into account how Colleen talks about trigger warnings and markets this very book. There's zero reason for Colleen not to want to prepare her audience about the book being about domestic violence, but she seemingly actively just did not want to. It's really odd to me to depict these things that you think are harmful and not want to be honest with your audience about what they're getting into cracking this book open. Why would you want to manipulate people like that? Domestic violence is not a twist. While we see Lily fall in love with Atlas through these journals, that's still a background note to the meat of this book, which is her meeting and falling for Ryle, and then her being abused by Ryle. Her ending up with, or at least we assume she does, with Atlas in the end is such a background note. The nicer guy, I guess, feels like something Colleen slapped in here so she could just still call this a romance, when it was not. This is a contemporary fiction book centered around domestic violence. And I don't know why you would even want to make a nail polish line for such a book. It only adds to the ongoing criticism that you don't care about accurately marketing such a topic to your readers because you don't really care about the topic. That's how it feels to me. I'm sorry. All other signs point to that being the case. If you are looking for a good book that talks about domestic violence, please look no further than In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado, who's a masterful writer in a way that Colleen Hoover will never be. I'm sorry. Now, technically, this is a memoir. However, it is written so skillfully, it feels like fiction because it's written in very lyrical prose and it's using typical like horror tropes in parts of it. It is a masterclass in writing. It is an incredibly impactful book talking about the way that we talk about domestic violence when we are experiencing it, when others are experiencing it. It's incredibly important. It's a super impactful piece of literature that I would recommend reading. And notice how Carmen never made a nail polish line to market it. She never said, grab your florals, come check this out. That didn't happen. You wonder why? And it wouldn't have mattered if like Carmen ended it with, and then I met the most perfect woman and we lived happily ever after, because that's not what the story was about. It was about domestic violence and the experience, the way that we deal with domestic violence, what it looks like, the very horrific details of that experience. So I recommend reading this. The dedication is to Colleen Hoover's father, who was abusive towards her mother, for my father who tried his very best not to be his worst, and for my mother who made sure we never saw him at his worst. So it opens and our main character Lily says, as I sit here dangling on this ledge, I can't help but think about suicide. Not my own. I like my life. I'm just wondering if other people have regrets. She's in Boston, by the way. And she says, somehow I think not. As in about other people regretting dying by suicide. I think a lot about death, especially today, because I gave an epic eulogy for the prodigious Andrew Bloom, father of Lily Bloom, who once fell in love with a homeless guy and brought great shame upon her entire family. I hate the way this is framed. Oh God, it just feels so disingenuous, but I guess I need to get used to that in Colleen Hoover books, don't I? Especially this one, which was mismarketed to all hell. Lily Bloom, who once fell in love with a homeless guy and brought great shame upon her entire family. That's me. I'm Lily Bloom. She's 23 at this point. She is living in Boston. She's on the roof of an apartment building that is not hers, but is near hers because it has a better view. And she's thinking about other people's suicides in a way that I find gross, but this is a Colleen Hoover book, so who's surprised that I'm grossed out in chapter 1? Put those hands down. Nobody's surprised. And in stumbles a person, and at first she's thinking, I hope it's a woman. I don't want to fear for my safety. But it's not. It's actually a very hot man. Oh, okay, perfect. He then kicks the shit out of a patio chair, which she mentions repeatedly must be made out of marine-grade polymer. For some reason, Colleen needed me to know that. It must be made out of marine-grade polymer. My dad once ran over a chair that was made of marine-grade polymer. Marine-grade polymer gets brought up in this book, I don't know, probably 8 times. For what purpose? I don't fucking know. So this guy kicks the shit out of a patio chair made of marine-grade polymer. Lest you forget. and then he lights up a joint. God, I wish that were me. And then he sees her. This is our love interest, a man in his 20s named Ryle, because this is a Colleen Hoover book and we never have normal names. It's not Coho unless we have ridiculous first names. Remember Ben 10? From the other book? Me too. The first thing he says to her is, "What's your name?" "I feel his name in my stomach," she says. That's not good. Maybe you should call a doctor. Not him though, because he is a doctor. He tells her to get down, which is just great that we're starting with him ordering her around.
Nervous than a salmon in a bear hug.
He explains, "I'm a neurosurgeon. My name's Ryle. I'm in my final year of residency. Should doctors be smoking pot?" She asks. Probably not when they get called in to work, especially neurosurgeons, which he's about to get called into work, but okay. So they talk about all kinds of stuff when they meet each other, and it's trying to manufacture wow, what great chemistry these two people have. They're talking about the great mysteries of Boston, and he's like, "What's another great mystery of Boston?" And she says, "Your name." He says his name is Ryle Kincaid. Of course it is. And she says that her name is Lily Bloom. "It's the name of a 2-year-old girl. What makes it worse is I love gardening." You're right, Lily, that does make it worse. She has a master's in business and works for the biggest marketing firm in Boston. And so he asks her, "Okay, what's your middle name?" And of course her middle name is Blossom. Her full name is Lily Blossom Bloom because her mom's maiden name was Blossom, and her dad and her thought, wow, how serendipitous. So they decided to make it as flowery as possible. Get it? It's a joke because flowery writing. Okay. So they start doing being very blunt with each other. And he's like, "Tell me something." She said, "My dad died this week and I hated him." He's like, "That's not funny." She's like, "No, I'm serious." He says, "I like your honesty. Do you ever wish people were more transparent?" And she says, "Naked truths aren't always pretty." "Naked truths. I like that. Tell me your naked truth." She says, "My dad was abusive to my mom. He would abuse her and then spend a week making up for it." And she would wish that he would get the abuse over with, which she realizes is a horrible thing to think. But she knew that if he would just get it over with, then he would spend the next week being nice, and she looked forward to that, which I think is a pretty, unfortunately, normal thing for kids living in domestic violence situations to think. So you can see there's fingerprints of Colleen's real experiences here. He says his naked truth is that he watched a little boy die tonight. There were 2 brothers playing with a loaded gun, and one of them accidentally shot the other, and he says he wants the parents to feel bad. Now, we find out later that he accidentally did this to his own brother, and that's the reason for why he is so explosive. Even though he's in therapy, apparently he's not doing any work in therapy. I don't know. It never really says. But I am really confused by this because I'm I wonder if he has a lot of deep-seated rage for his parents, and I thought that would eventually come up in the book, but it does not. And I'm not saying I'm waiting for them to write out every single reason why this man is the way he is and make it make sense. I just thought that it would come up because it seemed to be the point of why he was so mad and why he wanted this kid's parents to feel bad, but it just didn't. So I'm confused on what Colleen's intention is, but Colleen writes very superfluously. Every sentence you're not sure if it's supposed to be something you're supposed to give a shit about and tuck away for later context or not. And most of the time it's not. She tells him another naked truth. "My mom asked me to deliver my dad's eulogy," which she did that morning, and she explains her mom wouldn't let her back out and asked her, "Just say 5 great things about your dad." So she stood up at the podium and she said, "I'm Lily Bloom. I'm here to talk about my dad. I'm here to say 5 great things." And the first thing, and then she never continued. She just stopped and stood there for several minutes until her uncle came and got her. Her uncle, who never comes up again, by the way. And of course, Ryle, hearing this, says, "You're my hero." She asks him, "Tell me the most recent thought that you had that people don't typically say out loud." And his answer is, "I want to fuck you." Okay. She explains he's not into one-night stands. He's like, "Oh, well, I'm only into casual sex." And they're like, "Oh, that sucks. That doesn't work out for the 2 of us." God, I wish it had ended there. Another naked truth from her. "The first guy I ever had sex with was homeless." Hate the way this is framed. Hate it, hate it. Hate the way that you talk about this. No reason to boil down Atlas to just that. And if we were going to talk about it, maybe you could say, "First guy I ever had sex with was asking me how long until I turned 16, because that's really the red flag behavior there. Not that Atlas was kicked out of his house by his mom, but in fact, that he was asking you, when do you turn 16? For, purposes. He's like, "I need more of this story. We lived in Maine. Behind our place was a condemned house. And there was a guy living there named Atlas who I made friends with. And I used to take him food until my dad found out and beat him up." And it says, he looks at her like he knows there's more to that story. Yeah, idiot. the sex part that you just mentioned 20 seconds ago. His naked truth is, I don't want to get married. I'm almost 30 and I have no desire for a wife and kids. I just want success. But if I admit that, people think I'm arrogant. And he specifically says he wants both professional success and social status success, which, okay, red flag.
What? What?
I don't know, maybe that's just me, but when a man says that he wants success and social status, something about that is like, why do you want that? Can you be specific, please? I want to be the best neurosurgeon in my field. My mom thinks I'm wasting my life away. If I had kids, I'd be setting them up for failure. I'm too selfish for a marriage and kids. I still have sex. I just don't have relationships. He's like, okay, so if we can't, like, boink, how far can we go? And he starts feeling her up and being like, is this too far? Super. And then his phone rings. Don't forget that he smoked a bunch of pot just a couple minutes ago. It's work, and he's not supposed to be on call, he says, but he goes in anyway, even though, again, he just smoked weed. Stellar. I won't even drive to the mailbox when I smoke weed, but all right. Chapter 2, her mom calls, and she's like, I shouldn't have put doing the eulogy on you. And her mom is taking on blame that isn't hers to take, is what Lily notices, and that's a trend for her mom. They hang up. She's going through her stuff, and she finds her old journals that, again, are written to Ellen DeGeneres. Now, her journals, again, are... I don't know what the point is. I guess it's meant to be cute and silly, I guess, but that didn't land for me. So then we hear 15-year-old Lily Bloom talk to Ellen DeGeneres. She explains the vacant house and that the person who was living there was an old woman who died and she owed in taxes, so her daughter couldn't take on the house, so now it's vacant. And she noticed a light on one day. And the next day, she sees a guy leaving the house, get on her school bus, and go to her school. So at the end of the day, the kid goes back to the house. She finds out his name is Atlas Corrigan, because of course it is. These names are always ridiculous. It's a Colleen Hoover book. She's gardening, and because she's Lily Bloom the gardener. Don't forget, she loves gardening. She notices that some of her radishes are missing and realizes Atlas is likely eating her radishes because he's in an abandoned house with no food. So she makes some food, brings it over there, and she realizes this dude is probably watching her too. In her next letter to Ellen, she says, wow, Ellen, so much is happening to us. You're interviewing Barack Obama, who could be our next president, and I'm feeding a homeless boy. Oh, Colleen. He says thank you to her at the bus stop the next day, and it says his voice gives her chills, which is, what happens whenever she meets a guy with a nice voice. I don't know, I guess all of these men in her life have those voices that the women love from Mass Talk and the over with the guys with the masks. I'm not doing a good job explaining this. Never mind. Like corpse husband voice. Those kinds of things. And she says that his eyes remind her of a dog. Oh, Colleen. She asks, why don't you live with your parents? And he says, because they don't want me to. So then after school, she lets him use her shower before her parents get home, which is very dangerous because, again, her dad is abusive and will explode on people. I believe her dad is the mayor, but that doesn't come up in any sort of meaningful way. In present, her mom calls her again, and adult Lily is like, Mom, please don't move to Boston, because her mom is like, I don't have anything holding me here. I should move to Boston. And she feels stressed and says, where's a marine grade polymer chair when I need one?
Shut up about the sun! Shut up about the sun!
She reflects on being relieved when her dad was diagnosed with cancer and he couldn't be abusive anymore, which again, I think is something that's very common amongst abuse victims, is they're like, well, at least now this person is physically unable to hurt me or whoever they're hurting in the family. Chapter 3 is 6 months later for some fucking reason. Lily and her mom are at her storefront. Her mom's not all that impressed. Her mom did move nearby to Boston, and a woman named Elisa just happens to show up. And she's like, I want to work. I'll work for free. In this economy? Lily says, I can't let you work for free, but sure. And calls herself a Pinterest whore, which is, oh my gosh. These are things that we say in text to each other as millennial women. We don't say them out loud. Lily is like, I want this shop to be brave and bold. How can we be brave and bold selling flowers? What if we don't do what other flower shops do, Elisa, my new employee that just stumbled in from off the street? Because I'm not like other girls. Let's not do typical things you think of when you think of spring. When you think of flowers, you think of spring, you think of happy, bubbly, pink. No, I want to do something different. I want to also do winter and death. And I'm like, ma'am, do you know that some flowers actually grow in winter? I know this might be shocking to you, even though your name is Lily Blossom Bloom and you love gardening, but there are actually flowers that grow in winter. I know. Amazing. I'm surprised you didn't find that out, being that you're a Pinterest whore. She specifically says she wants to be edgy. Like that word is actually used. I don't want regular vases. I want purple velvet with silver studs. This is so cool, dude. This is very Hot Topic circa 2016. Love it. No lie, if that stuff was at Hot Topic in 2006, I might have bought it myself. This is really embarrassing. She says there's a flower shop on every corner, but what flower shop caters to all the people who hate flowers? None of them. What bookstore caters to all the people who hate books? Oh, wait, shit, that's just the Christian bookstore. My bad, let me do another analogy. What boba shop caters to all the people who hate delicious boba? None, because it doesn't make sense. Do you hate boba? Boy, do I have the boba for you. Elisa says, Lily, it's so twisted, it's brilliant.
It's so dumb.
It's so dumb, it's brilliant.
No! It's just dumb.
Then a bunch of crates fall on Lily's ankle because, of course, and Elisa pulls out her phone and calls her husband Marshall, who's drunk down the road watching a Bruins game, and asked to talk to her brother. She's like, Marshall, put my brother on the phone. She tells them to come down to the shop with ice. I don't know how they knew what shop she was at. Okay. Marshall shows up in a SpongeBob onesie, and her brother, also in a onesie, is there, and it's Ryle Kincaid. Elisa, who just stumbled into the shop, is the sister of Ryle Kincaid, who Lily met 6 months ago. Anyway, he's inebriated, and she even comments on how both times she's met him now, he has been drunk or high. Weird for a neurosurgeon, and he says it's his first day off in a while. Yeah, but you still went to work high, which she just ignores. Glosses right over. Red flag.
Knuckle sandwich instead.
Again, I won't even drive to the mailbox high. I don't know why he's doing it. And then not saying, hey, I can't come into work. I just smoked a fat one. So he's assessing her foot, and she says, naked truth, I wanted to go back to the roof to see you, but I was scared you'd be there. You make me nervous. Oh, red flag.
Put that sentence back in your mouth.
Red flag. Please elaborate, because it's sounding like red flag. He says, my turn? I still very much want to fuck you. And his sister hears this and is horrified. Which girl? Same, but for different reasons. And they are all just weird about this. And instead of explaining they've met before, but this is a Colleen Hoover book, why would we communicate with each other like normal humans? He wraps her ankle. It is sprained. And Lily decides to just word vomit. By the way, I didn't seek out your sister. I'm not trying to trap you. What do you mean trap him? What do you mean trap him? You mean find him? How's this a trap? She says, naked truth, I'm really attracted to you. There's not much about you I don't like. What do you mean? You have met twice. My God, can Colleen Hoover ever not write characters who are obsessed with each other after one conversation? Is that challenge impossible level? I believe so, Colleen. But since they want different things, he says they should just keep their distance. And then she says that he calls Elisa, his sister, Issa, which she assumes is short for Elisa. Oh, is it? Did ya? Did you assume that? Did ya?
It's just dumb.
Chapter 4, she is reading her journals to Ellen DeGeneres again. Did you forget about the journals to Ellen DeGeneres? I'm here to remind you. Atlas gives her old gardening tools he finds or stole from the abandoned house he's occupying. He asks, how old are you? 15, she says, and the look in his eyes seems a little sad about my age.
Put that sentence back in your mouth.
If you ever need help with gardening, it's not like I have much going on. Also, he loves the Ellen DeGeneres show too. I never watched that show. I wasn't allowed to. And then by the time I was old enough to decide for myself, I didn't care about those shows. My mom watched Dr. Phil for I don't know what reason. In chapter 5, Ryle is banging on her front door, which in Scrubs, which is stupid hot, apparently. He didn't know where exactly she lived and banged on 29 doors in her apartment building until he found hers. There's a real big naked truth coming, he says. He has exams coming, residency is ending, but he can't get her out of his head, and he says, I need you to make it stop, Lily. You met twice. I hate you. Did you seriously just knock on 29 doors so you can tell me I'm making your life hell and you need me to sleep with you? Yes, but also don't forget, this is only the third time you've met. Isn't that cute? He slaps his hands on the wall on either side of her head and says, please, I'm really good at it. You wouldn't even have to do any work. I've never been less horny. How does Colleen consistently make sex sound so repulsive? This is my third Colleen Hoover book. And every single time I'm like, wow, I actually never want to have sex again in my life. It actually has ruined it for me. It's like when you eat bad food. It's like, have you ever eaten McDonald's and it gives you food poisoning and you're like, actually, I'm swearing off McDonald's for good. That's me with sex every time I read a Colleen Hoover book. Every single time. Ruins it for me. He literally begs her to have sex with him until she says, okay, but let me shower first. And by the time she's done, he's asleep on her bed. And she takes a picture of them laying next to each other on his phone, which is weird. But he took a picture of her the first night that they were on the roof together when she was sitting in, the marine grade polymer chairs. So I guess they're even now or something. When they wake up, he says sorry and he'll never bother her again, which, God, I wish. She tells him, have a nice life. He says, you too. Chapter 6, 53 days later. Elisa and Lily are doing their soft opening on Lily Bloom's flower shop. She's really excited. She made her dream come true, and her first customer is Ryle Kincaid. He says he's buying flowers for a girl, and Lily is brimming with jealousy. His sister asks if the girl is coming to her Elisa, the sister's birthday party. She's like, are you bringing her to my birthday party? Because Elisa still does not know that Ryle and Lily have the hots for each other. For some reason, they're just avoiding saying it and making it stupid awkward in the process. So he leaves a note on the flowers to be delivered to the flower shop's address because, of course, and the note just says, make it stop, as in him being horny. He wants to stop being horny, and the only way he can stop being horny is if he sleeps with Lily. Oh, what kind of flowers were they, you're asking? Lilies. And Elisa says, I'll text him. How can a neurosurgeon be such an idiot? Ma'am, the call is coming from inside the house, I fear. Please get a mirror.
It's just dumb.
This is a personal attack on my brain cells, Colleen. Chapter 7, she's getting ready, and guess what? Just like Tate and Ugly Love, she has one singular guy friend who will come up for one singular chapter in order to make the guy who doesn't want to date people jealous. Exactly like Ugly Love. Beat for beat. Colleen only knows how to write one thing. It doesn't make sense how she sells all these copies. One singular guy friend, and of course, just like an Ugly Love, he's gay, because we wouldn't want there to be any actual competition for the love interest. His name is Devin, because of course it is. A normal name for a guy who will never come up again. We wouldn't want to have friends, especially with men. This is a Colleen Hoover book. So of course, just like every other Colleen Hoover book, the gay guy friend is used to make the love interest man jealous. Hey, at this birthday party, Ryle's there, and turns out he has an enormous picture of Lily from the first night we met. He met blown up in his room, which he lives at his sister's apartment, by the way. She's filthy rich. Filthy, filthy, filthy rich. Like bonkers rich. And Lily can't stand rich people, but gives a pass to Elisa because Elisa donates to charity. Cool, 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 cool. And if you recall, this is only the 4th time that these people are meeting, okay? This is only the 4th time at their meeting. They've actively conversed with each other for maybe an hour total. Yes, he has a picture of her, but it's totally normal to be obsessed with somebody you met 6 months ago and have met 4 times since. Absolutely. With her red hair sitting on a marine grade polymer chair. Oh, did you forget about the marine grade polymer? Colleen won't let ya, and neither will I. She's annoyed about the picture and the jealousy that he's showing towards her friend Devin, so she goes to the roof. He shows up, he kicks everybody off the roof.
What?
And to her, he says, I'd like to give you an opportunity to share your naked truth. No, I'd like to give you an opportunity to rewind and do all of that over again and do it the right way. Don't kick other people off your roof. Don't be rude to her friend. Don't have a picture of her in your room. And if you're gonna do all that, you better apologize quickly. Clock's a ticking. She's like, do you want me or not? You are confusing me. I want you. I just don't want to want you. I'm too invested in you now and it hurts and that you only want me for one night. Okay, so again, this is literally the exact same dynamic in Ugly Love. And I don't ever want to hear another person say, well, then you sell as many copies as Colleen. Mediocrity is rewarded, and I don't really want to be rewarded for mediocrity. I don't really want, even if I could, I don't know that I'd feel right about doing what Colleen does, where she writes the same mediocre, if not mediocre, then obviously problematic story again and again and again with a bunch of weird people with weird names who can't communicate, where a guy doesn't want to date people until he meets this one girl with perfect hair and one gay guy friend, and they don't have any other people outside of this very tight-knit circle, and then suddenly he changes his mind even though he's traumatized, and then they date. I don't really want to get rewarded for doing that over and over again, but Colleen does, and that publishing is rewarding her for that. It is not a meritocracy up in publishing. It is a whole lot of mediocrity getting rewarded. Tate and Miles from Ugly Love, it's the exact same thing. This man doesn't do relationships until he meets me one time and he's so desperate to sleep with me and then eventually falls for me, but he has issues. That's what's going on here. He says nothing as she reveals this to him, which is, very out of the Miles from Ugly Love playbook. And so then she leaves and goes to see Devin, her friend, at this party because they're not actually doing birthday party stuff. This is all about just making a set for us to have drama between Ryle and Lily. Before she leaves, he yells her name, comes and picks her up, physically picks her up, and says to Devin, I need to borrow Lily for the night. Red flag. And of course, he takes her to his room, shoves her against a wall, pins her arms above her head, but apparently this is supposed to be in a sexy way, and then they're making out. And she's like, I don't want to be giving in, and tells him to put her down. He says, I'm sorry, I made the picture because she's the most, beautiful thing he's ever seen. I know I'm hurting you, but I'm hurting too, he says.
What?
You make me want to be a different person, but I don't know how to be what you need. This is all new to me. She says, okay, so don't have sex with me. And he says, okay. And he takes off her clothes and then they go to bed and they fall asleep. And she asks him, your sister is very rich. This apartment is ginormous. What does she do with the $10 an hour I pay her? And he says, she probably doesn't cash the checks. In the morning, the sister explains how she's so rich. She has people for everything, including she doesn't even have to buy her family members birthday gifts. She has people for that. Because her husband, Marshall, is a creator of apps, apparently. So then they have the conversation where she's like, so about me and Ryle, I met him before you came to the flower shop and I met you. And Elisa is like, I know my brother. And Ryle walks in and says, and what? Which is a red flag. Elisa's like, I have the right to give my friend an opinion because you don't have the best track record with relationships. He tells Elisa, well, as your brother, I would hope you would have more faith in me. Red flag again. Lily and Ryle talk and he says he has a big surgery coming up that he has to prep for, so he won't see her for a few days, which, whew, what a relief for me. Lily goes home and her roommate Lucy, who is completely irrelevant to this story, reveals she's engaged and Lucy wants out of the lease, which means that Lily will have to live on her own. Oh no. Chapter 8, we are back in teenage Lily's journals to Ellen DeGeneres. She has a conversation with Atlas where it's this really heavy-handed attempt to use metaphor to discuss how plants only grow if you treat them right, and how it's similar between parents and children. But if we're neglected, we end up homeless and incapable of anything meaningful, Atlas says about himself. Then they are rubbing compost on each other because they were gardening. Which, if you don't know, compost is made of cow shit. Just peak romance right there, Colleen. Thank you so much. And in her journal to Ellen, she tells Ellen DeGeneres, when he was wiping that cow shit on me, it was the most turned on I'd ever been. Now, I'm not going to lie to you. At the age of 16, I too was having sex. But I cannot ever say that I relate to the sentence of, cow shit being a turn on. That's new for me. Certainly. On a different day in, the past, her parents separately pulled up to her house while Atlas was there. He was, coming inside, hanging out, eating snacks, watching Ellen with her. He leaves, but outside her dad gets angry with her mom and starts choking her on the hood of her mom's car and yelling about how she doesn't respect how hard he works. And Lily tried to get him to stop. He threw her to the ground and Lily's head is wounded and her mom takes her to the hospital while her dad just takes off because he doesn't care. He doesn't give a shit about his family. Before getting to the hospital, her mom tells her, you need to tell them that you slipped on ice. You can't tell them that it was your dad. This hurts Lily because she thought for sure this was the final straw, that she would leave him now that he had hurt me. That was the moment I realized she would never leave him. I really thought that we would have like a bigger conversation with Lily and her mom, but it's just basically like Lily experiences this with her mom. Her dad dies. Lily and her mom have a relationship, but she's still judgmental towards her mom. Lily is then abused. Lily says, I get it now, and I'll stop being judgmental. And that's really it. The next day, she realizes Atlas saw or heard the fight and tries to cover for her dad, but he says, hey, I used to fall a lot too. So I thought that we would use this as a jumping off point to later be like, these are all the places I covered up these red flags or I made excuses, but we don't. That night, it's freezing because they're in Maine, and she takes blankets to the abandoned house, but realizes that it's freezing inside of the house too, and Atlas is literally sleeping on towels. So she sneaks him into her room for the night so he doesn't, die of hypothermia. He explains his mom is married to a guy who doesn't like him, and that's why he was kicked out. He was staying with a friend for a while, but that friend then moved to Colorado, and his mom wouldn't allow him to come home when his friend moved. He's just trying to ride out the last 6 months of school until he can join the Marines. And because he's 18, there's not much, if any, assistance for him. She asks, why would you want to serve a country that doesn't give a shit about you and put you in this situation? And he says, it's not this country's fault my mom doesn't give a shit about me. I got news for you, buddy. The military won't give a shit about you either because the country doesn't give a shit about its veterans. Don't get me started because I will and could be here for an hour complaining about the United States military and how shitty of an organization it is while claiming it cares about its people and then uses those people to harm other people. I could go on for hours. But then it goes on a pretty long paragraph about homelessness and classism and rich people hoarding money. But it's fine when Elisa does it because once in a while she donates to charity. Okay. In chapter 9, Ryle is texting her asking if she's awake, but he's already coming up the stairs to her apartment. And after he has already decided to sleep over and gotten in her house and taken off his shoes and said he sleeps better when he sleeps next to her, then he asks if it's okay that he's there. Red flag. Anyways, they start making out and she says, I think I've waited long enough. I would very much like you to fuck me now. Oh, ma'am, how polite. Although, just want to slide in here with this food for thought. This is still a stranger. this man is a stranger. This is like the 6th time you've met. And then it says there's an interlude of hands and moans and tongues and sweat, which reminds me of this old staple from Fourth Wing that someone turned into a book cover for me, where it said that they were a tangle of tongues and teeth. Love it. Love it. This is the first time I've ever been touched by a man. The few before him were all boys with nervous hands. And I'm like, why does this feel so familiar? I swear that this is in another Colleen Hoover book I read. Ma'am, I beg of thee, variety, 'tis the spice of life. This all happens so quickly. It says he takes me brazenly in one swift thrust, which is pretty chaste of a descriptor coming from the romance genre. Which again, this isn't supposed to be romance, or is it? Who knows? But I've been reading a lot of dark romance lately, so I tell you what, that is chaste in comparison. And then it says he's unapologetic in the way that he fucks me. Yeah, red flag. I mean, unapologetic is a theme with him. I'm not sure how you haven't caught on yet. Afterwards, he says, you were so right. You said it would be like a drug, but you failed to tell me you'd be the most addictive kind. Boo! Boo, 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 boo. Boo, boo, a million red flags, an entire ocean of them. Red flags, don't like. Be gone with you. Get thee behind me, Satan. In the next chapter, Elisa reveals that the reason she's working for Lily is because she can't get pregnant. I'm shocked. Colleen Hoover making somebody have trouble in the area of either getting pregnant, staying pregnant, or raising kids. It's not a Colleen Hoover book unless there's women being heartbroken about motherhood. Ryle texts and says, hey, I need my next fix, but she has dinner plans with her mom, and he's like, oh, can I go? Okay. He's supposed to meet her at the restaurant, but then just shows up at her work instead. Great. Red flag. At the restaurant, her mom says how serious Ryle acts and she's like, wow, you guys are like pretty serious about each other. And then she learns he's a doctor, and then everything's fine. Like, oh, he's a doctor. Good to go, which is interesting. Ryle then goes to the bathroom, and a waiter walks up to the table, and it's Atlas. Or she thinks it is. He walked away, and he looked just like Atlas Corrigan. And I'm like, what do you mean? It's only been 9 years since you saw each other. Like, when my son was, I want to say like a year and a half, when my son was like a year and a half old, I went to a Chili's with my in-laws in the town where they still live, where me and Carlos went to high school. And there was a guy at the Chili's who I went to high school with. And I was like, oh my God, I'm not going to say his real name, Jimmy, I can't believe you're here. Nice to see you. And I recognized him right away because even though it had been, I guess, if I graduated it had been 6 years since I graduated high school. So it's like 6 years since I've seen this guy. 6 years, 9 years, not a big difference. We all look pretty much the same. Like, it's not that big of a difference. But it's a Colleen Hoover book, so let's just add drama where there isn't a necessity for any. She leaves the table. Atlas finds her. They hug, they say hello, and then basically they just say goodbye. Like, they're just like, oh my gosh, nice to see you. And then they say goodbye, and she goes back to dinner with Ryle. After dinner, Ryle Ubers away, and Atlas is standing at Lily's car. How he knew which car was hers, I don't know. He asks who's the lucky guy, and she's like, oh, that's Ryle. And he's like, well, I'm dating someone too. I'm dating someone named Cassie, but I wish that this had happened, as in you and I saw each other a year ago, as in before he met Cassie. Boo, red flag. And this is just here to be drama for drama's sake, because turns out later in the book we find out there is no Cassie. He just wanted her to be jealous. Awesome. In chapter 11, back in the past, Atlas gets sick. Lily's taking care of him. He's been puking, and she takes care of him all day. And then he kisses her on the collarbone, and she's like, it was a thank you kiss. All right, sure thing. Totally normal to kiss somebody on the collarbone and a thank you. Later, when he feels better, he asks her, when do you turn 16?
Knuckle sandwich instead.
She says soon, and wonders what he thinks of 15-year-olds. Did he look at me like I was just a little kid? Ma'am, he kissed your collarbone? He's looking at you like a potential sexual partner. But either way, red flag behavior, because he knows it's statutory, which is why he's asking. And so does Colleen. There was zero reason to not make them both 17, 18. But then again, there was also zero reason in Ugly Love to make Rachel and Miles step-siblings. But it's a Colleen Hoover book, so why not? He asks, have you ever been kissed? And of course she hasn't, so then they're making out. Who's surprised? But Come to find out, he has an opportunity to move to Boston with his uncle. So then there's a night when her father physically, verbally, and then sexually assaults Lily's mom. Lily goes to attack her dad with a knife, but Atlas sneaks her away. Lily's mom sees Atlas pulling her away. Her dad does not. And her mom goes to talk to Lily and Atlas later, and she just doesn't deal with the existence of Atlas. She's like, I'm just gonna let this go. But she tells Lily, no, that wasn't rape. No, that wasn't rape. We're married, and, does a lot of mental gymnastics trying to rationalize why her dad is like this. Atlas does end up leaving for Boston. In the present, the flower shop, of course, is a hit. Who's shocked? And then Elisa reveals that she is pregnant. I'm sure that will end well and nothing bad will happen, I said in my notes. It's not like Colleen has the world's worst track record with that or anything, is what I said. And shockingly, Elisa's baby lives and is fine. I know, we're all shocked. Colleen, who knew it could be done by you? Certainly not everybody. And then there is a sex scene with Lily and Ryle where he's sticking fingers in her and then listening on his stethoscope for her heartbeat going up. Great. He has surgery tomorrow, but they are drinking and hanging out, and she makes him a casserole. Well, then they realize that the casserole is burning, and he goes and grabs it with no pot holder, and he burns his hand, and Lily is very drunk, and she's laughing hysterically. 1 minute she's laughing, and he's running his hand under the faucet, and next she's on the floor because he shoved her, and she hit her head on the cabinet. God damn it, this isn't funny. This is my fucking career. And then he realized, fully what he's done. Oh my God, Lily, I'm so sorry. I panicked. I didn't mean to push you. He's not like my father. He can't be, she says to herself. So they go out to dinner with Elisa and her husband, I believe, the next day. And in a major red flag, Ryle lies about what happened to Lily, why Lily got hurt. And of course, the restaurant they are back at is Atlas's restaurant because he's not just a waiter, he actually owns it. Atlas sees the wound on Lily and he's angry. Lily goes to the bathroom. Atlas follows her and he's like, leave him, Lily. It was an accident. You sound like your mother. Then they're leaving the bathroom at the same time. Ryle sees them leaving together. And of course, that's not going to go well. So Ryle gets angry. Atlas threatens him. Lily's like, Atlas, no. This is Atlas, the homeless boy you pity fucked. Then they get into a fist fight and Atlas kicks Ryle out of his restaurant. He's like, I didn't want this, Lily, as in this relationship. Then leave. I'm sorry I'm such a burden. Naked truth, Lily. Did you know he worked there? Yes, that's why I didn't want to go back, because she had said to him, I don't want to go back to that restaurant. He's like, it's fine, we'll go. Did you tell him what happened? No. Why were you in the bathroom with him? He came in because he was worried about me. If you don't want to be with me, tell me now. I only want you. And he says, I love you, Lily. So now they're saying, I love you. Atlas shows up at her work the next day. He apologizes for saying that she sounds like her mom, gives her his number on a Post-it note in case she needs it, and she tucks it into like the inside of her phone case. She says, I won't need it. And also says, by the way, I never called you a pity fuck. I'm sorry that he said that. And he says, I know I wasn't a pity fuck. I was there. You were there. And a whole legal adult asking when a 15-year-old was turning 16. And I'm still not sure why Colleen did that. He gives her a copy of Ellen DeGeneres' book with a note from him that says, just keep swimming. And he bought it 3 years ago, hoping to eventually see her again. In the final journal entry to Ellen, it's been 6 months since she's seen Atlas. Recounting what happened on her birthday, it says that she came to see her, snuck into her room, and reveals that the day that she met him, he had originally gone to the abandoned house with the intention of dying by suicide. Basically, she saved his life. But he's like, don't wait for me. I'm leaving for the military, and when my life is good enough for you to be a part of it, I'll find you. And then it mentions, without saying explicitly what's happening, that they do have sex, which I'm relieved that it wasn't on page because, again, she is 16 and he is 18. He gives her a fridge magnet. It's like a Boston fridge magnet that he brought her. Well, unfortunately, her bedroom door wasn't locked. Her dad heard her talking to someone and comes in to find them laying together and beats Atlas with a baseball bat. He had to be taken away in an ambulance. And her dad is revered as a hero after this because apparently Atlas being homeless was like a blight upon the town or some shit. And how dare he, a homeless guy, touch Lily, which he's not a homeless guy. He is a high school student still, and he's going into the Marines when he graduates from high school. No mention of how it's borderline statutory, though, just constant discussion of how he's unhoused or was. Okay. She eventually got a heart tattooed on the collarbone where he had kissed her that one day. In present, she said she's sad that he never tried to find her like he promised, but she hasn't actually asked him, why didn't you try to find me sooner, or did you try to find me sooner? She's just assuming. And now she feels like she feels just as strong for Ryle as she did for Atlas back when she was 15, 16. Part 2, because apparently we need parts for this book. She meets Ryle's mom, who's been dying for him to settle down, and she just loves Lily. Elisa, pregnant, lest you forget, says, I can't wait for you and Ryle to have a baby. And I thought she was going to say, yeah, Ryle doesn't really want kids. I don't really know what our long-term plans are. Instead, she says, I don't know if he wants to. We've never really talked about it. Ma'am, what do you mean? You have talked about it. That was the first conversation you ever had. He said, I don't want a relationship and I don't want kids. I'm too selfish to have kids. He specifically said, I'm too selfish to be a dad. Just retconning that entirely. The next paragraph is him being like, I'd marry the hell out of you, Lily. Let's do it right now. Let's go to Vegas. Let's get married. And Elisa's like, you can't do that. She's a girl. She wants a real wedding. Do you want a real wedding? No. And he says, naked truth, I'm so excited to marry you, I could piss my damn pants. Okay. And after they get married, which you don't really see, it just skips and it says, Ryle and I talked on the plane to Vegas and kids are on the table. We had a lot of other important discussions. I told him I always want separate checking accounts and he told me I have to promise to never become vegan and I have to vote. Wow, I love when we just shit on vegans for no reason. How fun. It's not like every single piece of media I come across feels like they're just shitting on vegans. I'm not even vegan anymore and I'm still tired of everybody shitting on vegans. Like if you don't want to eat that way, fine. I'm not eating that way either. But why are we always shitting on vegans? Leave them alone. And why are we always like, when another person isn't vegan, it's like, oh, it's disgusting. Like I remember watching Brooklyn Nine-Nine and that one guy being like so disgusted that the girl he wants to date is a vegan. I'm like, shut up. Why are y'all like this? Just let them eat in peace. What's it to you? Anyway, as if I needed another reason to fucking hate Ryle. So after they've been married for I don't even know how long, not very, she comes home one day and he's there and he's mad. He has found Atlas's phone number inside the case of her phone. She forgot it was even there. He throws her phone. It shatters. He leaves. She goes after him and tries to talk to him while he's going down the stairs, and he pushes her. And after she comes to, he says, you fell down the stairs. You pushed me. You might have a concussion. You pushed me. You fell. I married a liar. You can call Atlas if you need help. He leaves and then hits his own head on the door, like on purpose, and then comes back and begs her to say she's not seeing Atlas. This is a sea of red flags. She explains, I forgot I even had the number. You overreacted. You need to get out. And he's like, no, you fell down the stairs. And she says, get out of my apartment. The next day, Elisa is seeing signs of what's going on and knows Ryle broke Lily's phone and tells Ryle, you need to tell her, and tells Lily, please hear him out. Red flag from Elisa. Perfect. Just what we needed. He explains the night that they first met, he was upset because a little boy had shot his brother and he was mostly mad at the parents. He said, I knew it would destroy him for life because that is what happened to me. When he was 6 and his brother Emerson was 7, he didn't know he was holding a real gun and he shot Emerson, his brother. I would never tell you this is an excuse. It's not an excuse. It's my reality. I don't remember pushing you, but I did. He says he's in therapy and he's had these like issues with rage his entire life ever since he shot his brother. And she's fighting with herself because she's like, I said if he did this again, if he hurt me again after the casserole, that I would leave. I told myself my whole life I wouldn't repeat what my mom did with my dad, but my dad didn't have an excuse. Ryle screwed up, but he's trying. You aren't a bad person, Ryle. When you get mad, just walk away or ask me for help. Help me, Lily. I need you to help me. Red flag. You can't help him. He has to help himself. He needs professional help. You cannot be his accountability partner. You are his victim. I did this with my dad when he was really I don't know if my dad's an alcoholic anymore. I don't talk to my dad. I haven't lived with my dad in a really long time, so I don't really know what's going on over there. I remember like thinking that it was my responsibility, that when my dad was doing all this crap and abandoning me and doing all of this like junk, that it was my responsibility to like be his accountability partner and make excuses for him. And I was not. That was not my responsibility. Not just because I was a kid, but because he was treating me like crap because of the alcohol. And nobody, no person, child, adult deserved that. You cannot be the accountability partner for somebody who is treating you poorly. That's not how it works. That's not your responsibility. After this, they soon realized that they didn't think through getting married because he's being offered a job in Minnesota and wants them to move there. She's like, my life is here. This is something we should have discussed on the plane to Vegas. Oh, no shit. Colleen writing people who don't have basic conversation? It's ugly love all over again. He gets mad, he smashes a vase and says he's gonna leave. When he comes back, he says, okay, we'll stay in Boston. So she takes this as a sign like, okay, he's doing the thing. He's leaving when he gets mad. And it's like, he is leaving when he gets mad after he shouted at you and smashed a vase. These are the things that we excuse away, hoping that it's not as bad as we're perceiving it. He decides to get them a new apartment inside of Elisa's building. It's huge, of course, because he's rich, even though she, hates rich people, I guess. And he comes to her work and he tells her, hey, I got selected for a 3-month surgery thing in Cambridge, so I'm going to have to leave for 3 months. Also, you're in an article about best new businesses in Boston. Congratulations. And also, Elisa is in labor. So Elisa does have a daughter and they named her Riley. Ryle says that they should start trying to make one of these, as in a child, which is a genuinely terrible idea. One night, Lily comes home to Ryle sitting in the dark drinking scotch, and it says that he often drinks it to go to sleep, which is a red flag. I definitely would tell myself, oh, my dad's just drinking to go to sleep. It's really hard to admit you're living with an alcoholic and not just somebody who like, oh, I just need a drink to go to sleep. It's really difficult to admit that you are living with an alcoholic. So like, I understand that line of thinking. It says that the look in Ryle's eyes basically tells her that he's horny, and it says verbatim, this apartment is about to become a frenzy of clothes and kisses. And now I'm convinced that Rebecca Yarros went to the Colleen Hoover School of Writing, and he happens to find the Boston magnet that Atlas gave her. And she's like, oh, I don't remember where this came from, when he asks, where did you get this? If you are lying to your partner about teeny tiny things like fridge magnets that you got 9 years ago because you're afraid of them blowing up on you, that is a red flag. So things are heating up between them. He is drunk. He has fingers in her hair and he's gripping her hair, but then he looks at her and he says, naked truth, where did you get that magnet, Lily? So she tells him that hurts. He takes his fingers out of her hair and puts a hand on her throat and then shows her the article in the newspaper, the best new businesses in Boston thing. They never read it together. Well, apparently he read it. They were so excited about the new baby coming that, they put it off. And he tells her, I want you to read it to me with your shirt off. This is sexual harassment. It doesn't matter that it's her husband. If somebody forces you to do this, it is sexual harassment. This is awful. If you are being forced in a sexual capacity to do things that you do not want to do, it is inappropriate. He has her read a part of the article where it talks about Atlas, who also has a business in Boston. And it turns out that Atlas restaurant is called Bibs, but it's not like an homage to like bibs that you wear while eating. It's short for Better in Boston. And he says that he named it after Lily, who meant a lot to him in the article. And Atlas was asked by the interviewer if the girl knows that the restaurant is named after her. And he just said, next question. And Ryle took this to mean that she does know that the restaurant is named after her. She's like, how did you put all these pieces together? How'd you know about the magnet? How'd you know about Better in Boston? Like, how do you know about all of these things? And she realizes that all of her journals are out. That's obviously an invasion of privacy. It's also super embarrassing considering that they are addressed to Ellen DeGeneres. And then he grabs her boob very violently, and then he bites her where she has that heart tattoo where she had tattooed where Atlas kissed her, and he like bites her as hard as he can. She says, please leave, you're angry. And he says, I'm not angry, I just don't think I've proved to you how much I love you. I love you more than he ever did. Why can't you see that? She bites him on the tongue and he headbutts her. She blacks out, and when she comes to, he says, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. She lets him fall asleep, and then she sneaks out. She calls Atlas instead of her mom or Elisa or Devin, her gay guy friend, or Lucy, her old roommate, or her uncle, all these people that have been barely mentioned in passing, because she doesn't have any meaningful friends in this story, even before she met Ryle, as is usual with Colleen. It's not that Ryle isolated her from anybody, which is what, abusers tend to do. It's that Colleen never wrote anybody in here because she wanted to leave a vacancy that only Atlas could fill, which is cheap. Atlas comes and gets her and takes her to the hospital, but she asks not to go to Mass General where Ryle works. They won't give her a CT scan because when they did blood work, they realized that she is pregnant. She thinks to herself, I did this to myself. I am my mother, which is really sad. Atlas takes her to his house, and she's like wondering, well, how's Cassie going to feel about this? But she never says this out loud. She never discusses it. She never thinks, oh, is Cassie going to come home? Which is, a normal thing you would think to ask to somebody who's in a relationship, and instead she just doesn't ask. In the morning, he makes her breakfast. He tells her about his life in the Marines, where he learned to be a chef, and then he goes back to work, and he leaves her all of his information so that she needs to. She knows how to get in touch with him. and where he is and like the address to his work and stuff if she needs to like take a cab or something, right? And she decides that she has nothing else to do, so she'll write another letter to Ellen DeGeneres in which she explains, "Hi, Ellen, I know it's been a while, or it's been never, because she never sent these letters." She explains, "I ended up in the same position as my mom. I'm in love with a man who hurts me." And she explains that it's feeling like she's grieving the loss of somebody. It feels like Ryle has died because she doesn't feel like she knows who he is anymore. And sure, if you, again, like if you ever have been in one of these situations, you do feel like that, but then you're like, actually, no, this has been here all along and I've been ignoring it because I didn't want it to be there. I didn't want that to be true. And it's very conflicting because you still love that person, and because you love them, you've been trying to excuse their behavior. After I moved in with my dad, who I absolutely adored, my dad was my favorite person in the world, and I realized that he had become and was becoming more and more of an alcoholic. I did feel like I was consistently grieving the loss of the dad that I knew. But then talking to my mom, I was told like all of these things that from my childhood that did not add up. And I realized, oh, this idea of who my dad was is a farce. I have a very idealized version of this man that I have put on a pedestal while ignoring all of these things that happen and trying to excuse them away. And when I would see these like slivers of what I thought were the old him when he wasn't drunk, I would cling to them in hopes that it would be over and that he would go back to being this like fictionalized version of him that I thought I could get him back to. He's back, like real dad is back, I would think. And you make a lot of excuses for these people, hoping that they'll always like they can eventually return to who they were, but this is who they are. And I think that it did a good job in this book of getting up to a certain point where you are making them out to be different people, but it never like came to that aha moment where you're like, this is who they are and I have ignored it. This book sucks in what it's trying to portray. So she goes on to admit that the difference between her and her mom is that her mom did not have financial stability. And so maybe that was playing a part in why her mom did not leave. And that's a good point. It's easy for those of us who have means to sit here and say, well, why didn't you leave? They feel like they can't. Or they actually can't. This is what I would have done. Well, yeah, in your circumstances. Not in those circumstances, though, because you've never lived in those. And the book says 85% of women return to their abusers. And when I used to hear that statistic, I used to think that the women were stupid. It's sad that those are the first thoughts that go through our minds about the abused. Shouldn't we reserve our vitriol for the abusers, is what it says. And that is it. That is as deep as this book gets. And I just really expected more. Again, it's not that it's wrong. It's just that if you are positioning this book as trying to have this conversation, why'd you have it this way? And then say that this like very surface level statement is enough for you to pass it off as like you having this conversation on domestic violence. She worries about Ryle finding her, and so she doesn't want to go to a hotel. And even though she feels really awkward being at Atlas's house, she, doesn't want to leave because the credit card charge would be able to be tracked by Ryle, even though I thought they said that they had different checking accounts. And she says she doesn't want to go to her mom's, and even mentions her friend Devin, who we never saw again. She's like, if I go to anybody else, he'll be able to track me down because he knows everybody, but he won't be able to track me down through Atlas. And I'm like, what do you mean? He knows where Atlas works. He knows the restaurant that Atlas works at. He could just follow him home. He doesn't know where Devin works. He doesn't know where Devin lives. What are you talking about? Atlas is not the safest place. It's just Colleen was so lazy she wanted to write it that way, but then didn't actually make it logical. She decides to go into work, and of course she's the only one there, and of course Ryle shows up, but he has her keys to the apartment, and he says, I'm giving you the keys. I'm going to England. I'll be back in 3 months. You need time. You should go home. I won't be there when you get there. And she doesn't tell him that she's pregnant. And she notes, oh, well, he didn't apologize. And she says, the worst part of this is that you could have asked me for a naked truth about the journal and I would have told you the truth. But now we have to live with the consequences of your actions for the rest of our lives. And then she tells him to leave. Elisa obviously does not know what Ryle did. And Lily is lying to her and trying to avoid her so that she doesn't have to admit what happened. Meanwhile, she is back at Atlas's house and his friends show up to play poker. And Atlas is not there. They ask her if she wants to play poker. They're like, what happened to your head? And she just divulges the entire truth to them. She's like, my husband abused me and I'm hiding here. And then it's through these men that she learns there is no Cassie. She's like, so does Cassie play too? And they're like, who the fuck is Cassie? So Atlas walks in and she's like, where is Cassie? And he's like, there is no Cassie. So his friends leave. And the first questions she asks, which there's no reason why she couldn't have asked this sooner. She's been living at his house for days. Why did you never come back for me? But of course, manufacturing drama and pining by having people just not ask logical questions earlier is basically the entire premise of Ugly Love. Turns out he did come back. I knew it. He found her at college. He saw her happy, saw her with a guy. And she's like, well, yeah, I mean, I was with a guy, but it wasn't serious. I would have I would have left with you in a heartbeat. And he's like, well, my life wasn't good enough for you then, in my opinion. And you seemed so happy. So I was like, I'm going to sign up for another 4-year tour with the Marines. And he says he lied about Cassie because she seemed so happy with Ryle and he wanted to make her a little jealous. He takes her home and says, if you ever need me, call me, but only if it's an emergency because I'm not capable of basically being casual with you. Before he leaves, he tells her, if by some chance you're ever willing to fall in love again, fall in love with me. 6 weeks later, she is now 18 weeks pregnant because apparently she was already 12 weeks along. Wow. And her sister-in-law, Elisa, is asking her questions. How's Ryle doing in Cambridge? Has he figured out the subway system yet? And she's like, yeah, he did figure that out. And Elisa's like, see, now I know you're lying because there's no subways there. So what's going on? So Lily explains what happened, and Elisa says, as his sister, I hope you'll forgive him, but as your best friend, if you take him back, I'll never forgive you. And I'm like, yeah, but you could have earlier told her that, there were red flags, but, you just decided to keep that to yourself. That's interesting. So she decides to start wearing pregnancy clothes now because now she has told Elisa, hey, by the way, I'm 18 weeks pregnant. That's almost halfway through a pregnancy. Okay. And so now she hasn't told anybody she's pregnant. Ryle, Elisa, her mom, nobody. So she's like, I'm pregnant. Elisa gives her maternity clothes and she goes home wearing maternity clothes. And who's there? Ryle. But Elisa's husband, Marshall, is also there. And Ryle's like, I called him here to make sure, for your comfort, so that in case I get out of control, he'll come get me. He realizes Lily's pregnant and he's like, you have no idea what it's been like living for me with what I did to you. And she's like, you have no idea what it's been like. And I'm like, ew, I can't believe he made that about himself. How gross. He says he was planning to tell her that he was going to take the job in Minnesota and just leave and they would divorce. And now he can't do that because she has a part of him inside her. And he says, please don't take this baby away from me. So then they start to make out. Woof. But then she can't help but remember all the physical abuse while he's touching her. So they stop and she says, I wish this baby wasn't yours. And he leaves. She tells her mom about the pregnancy and about the abuse. And her mom says, don't move your limits like I did. If he loved you the right way, he would leave. He would see that he's harming you and he would leave out of love and leave you alone. And the limits thing she explained was like, don't, say, okay, I'm here up until this point and then move it. And I'll take this much abuse. I'll take this much abuse. Don't move your limits, set your limits. So it was never really a discussion on whether or not she would have an abortion. It was always like she wanted to keep the baby, which makes sense. I know part of the criticism of this is like, well, why wouldn't she even consider it, considering that she's going to have a baby with somebody who is physically, hurting her so badly. I think that part of that is like they wanted to have kids. They were planning to have kids. She had already prepared herself mentally. But if she had, that would be a totally, if it were in here, it would make sense. The fact that it's not, it makes sense for who Lily is in the context. So it's fine. To me, it doesn't bother me, but yeah, like if I were in this situation, I probably would opt for, terminating because I wouldn't want to deal with this. I wouldn't want to deal with this man and I wouldn't want to raise a kid with him. But then again, I'm in a position in my life where I don't want to have any more kids. I haven't been preparing to have kids. And also my circumstances are different. If I get pregnant again, it's very dangerous to my health. So again, like we can't really reserve, like going back to the idea of like, we tend to judge women for not leaving. Like everybody's circumstances are so different with the domestic violence, with abortion. Like everybody's so different. Ryle puts together the baby's crib for her. And when she finishes painting the nursery, she does invite him over to come see it. So they are trying to like get along. And he says, please tell me when you're ready to talk to me. I want to be your husband. And he says, she says to him, how do I know that you're not going to eventually hurt our baby the way that you hurt me? And he says, everything with the baby is on your terms. I want to be involved only on your terms. And he says, but what about you and I? What about us? She says, I don't know if I want to divorce or not yet, but I'm just not ready to decide. So months later, she's about to give birth. He's been sleeping on her couch since she's about to go into labor. She's still undecided about the divorce. Her water breaks. He takes her to the hospital. She gives birth and she has a girl. And they name her Emerson after his brother who he accidentally killed when they were kids. And the moment that Emerson is born, she knows she wants to divorce him and says this while they are just freshly holding their newborn daughter. He says, please don't do this. Give me one more chance. And she said, "What would you do if someday our daughter looked at you and said that someone was hurting her the way that you hurt me?" He says, "Lily, please stop. Please don't do this." She says, "What would you do if our daughter told you her husband tried to rape her? What would you say to her?" And he says, "I would beg her to leave, and I would tell her she's worth so much more." This is not affecting me because of the book. This is affecting me because I keep like projecting my experiences with my father onto this book, even though it wasn't physical abuse with my dad, but the alcoholism was so traumatizing. And my dad like really does not care about my kids, unfortunately. So like I imagine like saying this to my dad and just getting like the absolute worst response. Like, well, when I tried to talk to my dad about the alcoholism a couple of years back, he said none of that ever happened. So Ryle leaves. And so she's holding Emerson, and she thinks to herself, as hard as it is, her and Emerson break the pattern before it breaks them. And to Emerson, she says, "It ends with us." And in the epilogue, she has moved out of the apartment that they used to share. Emerson's now 11 months old. She's taking her to go spend her day with Ryle. It's Ryle's day with Emerson. And she runs into Atlas. And she's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm on my way to meet Ryle." And you can tell he's like, oh, disappointed. And she's like, "It's his day with Emerson." So then she drops off Emerson and she's like, "I have to go." She runs back to go find Ryle or Atlas. And she says, "Atlas, I wanted you to know that her middle name is Dory, because when her and Atlas were kids watching the Ellen DeGeneres show together, they really latched on to the line, 'Just keep swimming, just keep swimming,' because they were going through a lot." And so she named Emerson, her middle name, as Dory. And Lily said, "I wanted you to know." And Atlas holds her and says, "I feel like my life is finally good enough for you now. You can finally stop swimming now." And that's the end. It ends with an author's note from Colleen, which I'm not going to go over. And it just talks about how, it was inspired by her mom's experiences. And then it ends with us. It ends with a note that says, "Here's the domestic violence hotline and the suicide hotline." So I just feel like this book is pretty irresponsible in its marketing and not very good. It goes back to like the authorial intent. What was the intention here? I'm not really sure, but I do think that having books where like the idea that you could have a book where you're in this relationship where you're dealing with domestic violence, but there is hope, like you can stop the cycle, you can eventually find a person who will not abuse you. Sure, like I'm not against that at all. I'm not saying like, I can't believe Colleen did that, how dare she write a romance with somebody and have her her main character leave that person and go on to date somebody else. That is not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is the way that this was marketed, the way that the book talked about domestic violence, all of these things together form my opinion that Colleen Hoover is not a responsible writer who cares about having this conversation with her audience and cares about discussing this in a way that is helpful, in a way that matters, really. It just feels like it was there for drama and shock. And yes, I know that that's bonkers considering that Colleen's writing about stuff that her mom experienced, but that is certainly what it looks like. What an incredibly disappointing book. But I guess I shouldn't have any other expectation when it comes to Colleen. This is my third book from Colleen ever. I took it upon myself this year to try her out, and I am flabbergasted at the amount of, what do you even call it? Like success that publishing has deigned to give her. Like why? For what? For what possible reason? It's very disappointing. Again, if you would like to have a book that discusses domestic violence in a way that I feel like matters, like is important to the conversation, is doing what I think Colleen wishes she could do in a way, then I would highly recommend In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. What an exhausting book. I'm so glad we're done here. Thank you so much for watching. Comments and questions down below. I have nothing left to say. I need to go. I feel like kicking a marine grade polymer chair just, out of spite. For having to hear it 6,000 times. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I don't even know what else to say. Okay, this video ends with us being traumatized. Okay, thank you. Goodbye. And before I go, I have to say thank you for being a friend to my Therapy Bills patrons, and those are Alexander, Ashley H, Astra, Astrid P, Brittany Bobitney, Call Me Kodiak, Choco's Trash for Japanese Mysteries and Thrillers, Chris the Horror Therapist, DJ Rocktopus, EK Casey, Ellie, Aaron with 2 E's, Eric GalaxyBot, Jess, John E, Julie D, K, Kaleno K, Casey McKenzie, Kate W, Quinn, Lady Kittybug, Lictor of the Undying Josh, Liked her, Lichter? It can't be licked, can it? I don't know. Lady Chips, Lemon Jelly, Lily B, Max B, Min B, Mommy Zombie, Alice, Panoramic Demon, Peggy Luhu, Rain, Ree Mirage, Reese, SJ, Samar, Scarlet, Shiny, SMK, Spoopy, Steph B, T Delegati, 2 Orbit, Urchin Audrey, White Raven 13, Zorvictia, and Chai Guy. Thank you all so much for being here and for being a friend. And last but not least, I have to say thank you for being a friend to my potato starch Marxists, and those are AB Daniels Anaki, Alejandra, Alicia Herbie Derby Do. Alicia, what did you change your last name to? Althea, Amanda D, Andy, Angelica, Armadildo. Armadildo. What are you guys doing? Artie the Ninth, Ava, Ballads and Bookends, Beck, Blake Lemon Pants, Blythe, Bookish Brainrot, Bookish by Jenna, Bree, Kate B, Caitlin, Cardinal Ginger, Carlin, Carly, Casper, Kate W, Catherine, Kathy, CJ, Claire Online, Colleen, Corwin, Cosmic, Darius, Danielle, Darren, Desiree Michelle, Dilf Enthusiast, Dorothea, Drive-By Thinker, E.T. Cosgrove, Ebby, Emily A, Emma, Emma Kingsbane, Ezra Moon, Fiona, Francis, Gadarn, Hannah Bunny, Hannah C, Harpy Kuro, JM Tennant, Jay's on Olympus, Jelly V, Jen Michelle, Genderqueer, Jenny G, Jessa Sue, Jill, Jojo Bookish, Juicy Wizard, Kat, you guys are killing me, Catherine, Katie L, Kaylee, Kayala, Kendra, Kitten, KMTV, Laughing Cat Dog, Lauren G, Lazarus Ray, Library of Scars, Lindsay M, Lisa B, Lisa L, LP, Luciri, Lustful Octopus. Oh man, that reminds me of that Kraken book I just read the other day. Martin, Maddie Moen, Madison, Man-Eating Plant, Marquita, Megan, Malara, May, Mima Who, Molly, Never, Nicole G, Nicole R, Nemeska, Nyan Binary, Paige P, Paul, Penelope G, Penny Chilling, Foxglove, Pandemonium, Queen Cereal, Rachel B, Reba, Rebecca R, Ronnie, Rosie Thorns, Rowan, Sikoria, Saintbringer, Sakia Lume, Sarah H, Sarah the Bear, Sarah Z, Shamed, Shannon, Sean, Sisette, Sophie, Talia, Tiana, Trashcan Teddy, Triple M, Tito Phoenix, Wobbs. It says Wobbs. I am going to need you to tell me how to say that. It's WHAABZ. Is it Wobbs? Help me. Writer A and multi-level marketing scheme with a W. Oh my God, you guys kicked my ass today. All right, thank you.